The morning light filtered through the lace curtains of Isabella Morgan's childhood bedroom, casting delicate shadows across the walls she had known for 24 years. She sat at her vanity, staring at the reflection of a woman she barely recognized. The makeup artist had done her job well, transforming Isabella's naturally soft features into something more refined, more polished, more suitable for the wife of Gabriel Sinclair, the youngest billionaire in the country. Her wedding dress hung behind her, a masterpiece of silk and pearls that cost more than her father's annual salary. It was beautiful, breathtaking even, but every time Isabella looked at it, she felt a tightness in her chest that made it hard to breathe. This wasn't how she had imagined her wedding day as a little girl. Back then, she had dreamed of marrying someone who loved her, someone whose eyes would light up when she walked down the aisle, someone who would promise her forever and actually mean it. Instead, she was marrying Gabriel Sinclair, a man she had met exactly twice before today. A man whose dark eyes held no warmth, only calculation. A man who had made it crystal clear that this marriage was nothing more than a business arrangement, a solution to both their problems. He needed a wife to secure a massive inheritance from his late grandfather, and she needed money to save her family from complete ruin. Her younger sister Charlotte appeared in the doorway, her face pale and drawn. At 16, Charlotte should have been thinking about school dances and college applications, not fighting leukemia. The medical bills had drained every penny the Morgan family had, and then some. They had remortgaged the house, sold anything of value, and still, it wasn't enough. The experimental treatment Charlotte needed was available, but it cost a fortune they simply didn't have. Until Gabriel Sinclair's lawyer had walked into their lives 3 months ago with an offer that seemed too good to be true. "Isabella, you look like a princess," Charlotte whispered, her eyes filling with tears. She crossed the room and took her sister's hand, squeezing it gently. "I'm so sorry you have to do this because of me." "Don't you dare apologize," Isabella said fiercely, turning to face her sister. "You didn't ask to get sick, Charlie. And I would do anything, absolutely anything, to make sure you get better. If marrying Gabriel Sinclair is what it takes, then that's what I'll do. But what about love? What about your dreams?" Charlotte's voice broke. "You always said you wanted to marry for love, like Mom and Dad did." "Dreams change," Isabella replied, trying to sound more confident than she felt. "Sometimes we have to be practical. Besides, it's not forever. The contract is for 2 years. After that, we can quietly divorce, and I'll have enough money to make sure you're taken care of for life, and Dad's business will be saved." She didn't mention the other part of the contract, the part that made her stomach twist with anxiety. For those 2 years, she would have to play the role of devoted wife in public, attend events on Gabriel's arm, smile for cameras, and convince the world that theirs was a love match. What happened in private was left deliberately vague in the contract, and that uncertainty terrified her. Her mother Emma knocked softly before entering, already dressed in her mother-of-the-bride outfit, a simple but elegant navy dress. Her eyes were red-rimmed, and Isabella knew she had been crying. Emma Morgan had always been a strong woman, but watching her daughter sacrifice her happiness for the family had broken something inside her. "It's time, sweetheart," Emma said softly. "The cars are here." The drive to the cathedral felt surreal, like Isabella was watching her life happen to someone else. Her father Robert sat beside her in the limousine, his hand covering hers, neither of them speaking. What was there to say? They both knew this was necessary, but that didn't make it any easier. The cathedral was massive, one of the oldest and most prestigious in the city. As Isabella stepped out of the car, she could see the crowd of photographers and reporters gathered behind barriers, their cameras flashing like stars. This was a society wedding, the event of the season. Gabriel Sinclair marrying an unknown girl from a modest family had created a media frenzy. Inside, the cathedral was filled with hundreds of guests, most of whom Isabella had never met. These were Gabriel's people, the elite of society, dressed in designer clothes and dripping with jewelry. She spotted a few familiar faces, her aunt and uncle, some family friends, but they were vastly outnumbered. As the organ began to play, Isabella took a deep breath and linked her arm through her father's. The massive doors opened, and every head turned to look at her. She forced herself to smile, to walk with grace and confidence, even though her legs felt like they might give out at any moment. And then she saw him. Gabriel Sinclair stood at the altar, tall and imposing in a custom black tuxedo that fit him perfectly. He was undeniably handsome, with dark hair swept back from his face, strong features, and an athletic build that spoke of hours spent in the gym. But it was his eyes that held her attention, those cold, dark eyes that watched her approach with no emotion whatsoever. He didn't look happy or nervous or excited. He looked like a man attending a board meeting. As her father placed her hand in Gabriel's, Isabella felt the coldness of his touch. His hand was strong, his grip firm but impersonal. He looked at her briefly, his gaze sweeping over her face and dress with what might have been approval or might have been simple assessment. Then he turned back to face the priest, dismissing her as easily as one might dismiss a servant. The ceremony proceeded with traditional vows, words about love and honor and cherishing each other through good times and bad. Isabella spoke her responses in a voice that sounded steadier than she felt, while Gabriel's responses were clear and businesslike. When the priest asked if anyone objected to the union, the silence was absolute. "You may kiss the bride," the priest announced. Gabriel turned to her, and for a moment, Isabella saw something flicker in his eyes. Annoyance? Resignation? She couldn't tell. He leaned in, his hand coming up to cup her jaw, and pressed his lips to hers. The kiss was brief, barely more than a brush of lips, cold and perfunctory. There was no passion, no tenderness, nothing but obligation. The guests applauded politely as they turned to face the congregation as husband and wife. Isabella pasted on a smile and walked back down the aisle on Gabriel's arm, feeling the weight of hundreds of eyes on them. She caught sight of Charlotte, who was crying openly, and her mother, who looked devastated despite her attempt to smile. The reception was held at the most exclusive hotel in the city, in a ballroom that had been transformed into a winter wonderland of white flowers and crystal. Everything sparkled under the chandeliers, and a full orchestra played softly in the background. It was beautiful and expensive and completely devoid of any personal touches that might have made it feel like their wedding rather than just another society event. Gabriel was immediately pulled away by business associates and friends, leaving Isabella to navigate the crowd on her own. She was introduced to dozens of people whose names she forgot immediately, all of them looking at her with barely concealed curiosity. Who was this nobody who had managed to snag the most eligible bachelor in the country? "Mrs. Sinclair," a cold voice said behind her. Isabella turned to find herself face to face with Victoria Sinclair, Gabriel's mother. She was an elegant woman in her late 50s, dressed in silver silk, her blonde hair perfectly coiffed, and her expression one of barely concealed disdain. "I hope you understand what you've gotten yourself into. My son is not an easy man, and the Sinclair name comes with certain expectations. I trust you won't embarrass us." Before Isabella could respond, a young woman with warm brown eyes and a friendly smile appeared at her elbow. "Don't mind Mother, she's just protective," the woman said cheerfully. "I'm Amelia, Gabriel's sister. Welcome to the family, Isabella. I'm so glad my brother finally found someone. He's been impossibly grumpy for years." Amelia's warmth was a stark contrast to Victoria's coldness, and Isabella found herself genuinely smiling for the first time that day. "Thank you, that's very kind." The reception dragged on for hours. Isabella danced with her father, with Gabriel's business partners, and eventually with Gabriel himself. As they moved across the dance floor, his hand on her waist was impersonal, keeping her at a distance. "You play your part well," he murmured, his voice low enough that only she could hear. The guests seemed convinced. "That's what you're paying me for," Isabella replied, unable to keep the edge from her voice. His eyes flickered with something that might have been surprise. "Good. Remember, in public we're the perfect couple." What happens in private is our business, but out here, you smile and you play the loving wife. Understood? Perfectly, Isabella said through gritted teeth, maintaining her smile. When the reception finally ended, they were driven to Gabriel's estate on the outskirts of the city. The mansion was enormous, all modern architecture with floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked manicured grounds. Inside, everything was sleek and expensive and utterly impersonal. Gabriel led her upstairs without a word, down a long hallway to a set of double doors. He pushed them open to reveal a massive bedroom suite with a king-sized bed dominating the center. Isabella's heart began to pound. "This is the master suite," Gabriel said coldly. "You'll sleep here. I have my own room down the hall. As per our contract, this marriage is in name only. I expect you to be available for public events and family gatherings, but otherwise, we'll maintain separate lives. Is that clear?" Isabella felt a confusing mix of relief and something else she couldn't quite name. "Perfectly clear." "Good." Gabriel loosened his tie and turned to look at her, his eyes traveling over her wedding dress with an unreadable expression. "You can take that off now. The performance is over. As far as I'm concerned, Isabella Morgan no longer exists. You're Mrs. Sinclair now, a role you'll play when required. Nothing more." The words hit her like a slap. She had known this marriage was a business arrangement, but hearing him say it so bluntly, with such cold dismissal, made the reality of her situation crash down on her. She had sold herself, traded her freedom and her dreams for her family's salvation, and this was the price. Gabriel walked to the door, pausing with his hand on the handle. "Your belongings have been moved to the closet. The staff will answer any questions you have. Good night, Mrs. Sinclair." And then he was gone, leaving Isabella alone in the enormous bedroom, still wearing her wedding dress, feeling more isolated and alone than she had ever felt in her life. She walked to the window and looked out at the dark grounds, at the lights of the city in the distance, and let the tears finally come. She had saved her family, but at what cost? She was trapped in a gilded cage, married to a man who saw her as nothing more than a business asset, a necessary inconvenience. This was her life now. This was her future. And there was no escape for at least 2 years. Isabella wiped her tears and began the process of removing her wedding dress, each pearl button a reminder of the choice she had made. Tomorrow, she would wake up as Mrs. Gabriel Sinclair and begin learning how to survive in this cold, loveless arrangement. But tonight, she would allow herself to grieve for the life she had given up, for the dreams that had died, and for the girl she used to be. The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the master suite, waking Isabella from a restless sleep. For a moment, she forgot where she was, but then reality crashed back. She was in Gabriel Sinclair's mansion, in his bedroom, wearing expensive silk pajamas that had been laid out for her by staff she had never met. She was Mrs. Sinclair now, though the title felt foreign and uncomfortable, like wearing shoes that were 2 sizes too small. Isabella sat up and looked around the room in daylight. Everything was pristine and modern, decorated in shades of white and gray with minimal personal touches. There were no photographs on the nightstands, no books stacked carelessly, no signs that anyone actually lived here. It felt more like a luxury hotel suite than a home, beautiful but sterile. A soft knock on the door made her jump. "Come in," she called, pulling the covers up instinctively. The door opened to reveal a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and graying hair pulled back in a neat bun. She wore a simple gray dress and a warm smile that immediately put Isabella at ease. "Good morning, Mrs. Sinclair. I'm Grace, the head housekeeper. Mr. Sinclair asked me to help you get settled. I've prepared breakfast for you in the morning room, and your schedule for the week is on the desk." "Schedule?" Isabella asked, confused. Grace's smile was sympathetic. "Mr. Sinclair has arranged several appointments for you. Personal shopper, hairstylist, meetings with the family lawyer and accountant. He wants to ensure you have everything you need for your new role." Also, there's a charity luncheon on Thursday that you're expected to attend with him. Isabella felt her stomach tighten. The performance was continuing, just as Gabriel had said. Of course. Thank you, Grace. Over the next few days, Isabella was swept up in a whirlwind of activity. The personal shopper filled her massive walk-in closet with designer clothes suitable for a billionaire's wife. She was given credit cards with unlimited spending limits, though she felt uncomfortable using them. She attended meetings where lawyers explained prenuptial agreements she had already signed, and financial advisors outlined the generous monthly allowance Gabriel had arranged for her family. True to his word, Charlotte's medical bills were paid in full, and she was enrolled in the experimental treatment program. Her father's business received a substantial investment that pulled it back from the brink of bankruptcy. The Morgan family was saved, and all it had cost was Isabella's freedom. But the hardest part wasn't the fancy clothes or the intimidating schedule. It was the loneliness. The mansion was enormous, with more rooms than Isabella could count, but it felt empty. Gabriel left early each morning for his office and often didn't return until late at night. When he was home, he kept to his own wing of the house. They were living completely separate lives under the same roof. Isabella spent her days exploring the grounds, reading in the library, and trying to find ways to fill the endless hours. Grace became her lifeline, the only person in the house who treated her like a real person rather than an ornamental addition to the Sinclair estate. One afternoon, as Grace brought tea to the library where Isabella was curled up with a book, the older woman sat down beside her. "You look sad, dear. Is there anything I can do to help?" Isabella considered lying, maintaining the pretense, but something about Grace's gentle manner made her want to be honest. "I just feel so alone here. This house is beautiful, but it doesn't feel like a home. And Gabriel treats me like I'm invisible unless there's a public event where he needs me to smile and wave." Grace sighed deeply. "Mr. Sinclair hasn't always been this way. He used to be different, warmer. But after what happened with Sophia, he closed himself off completely." "Sophia?" Isabella asked, her curiosity piqued. "Who's Sophia?" Grace looked conflicted, clearly debating whether to share the story. Finally, she spoke. Sophia Reed was Mr. Sinclair's fiancée about 3 years ago. They were together for 2 years, and by all accounts, he was deeply in love with her. The wedding was planned, invitation sent. But 2 weeks before the ceremony, Mr. Sinclair discovered that Sophia had been having an affair with his former best friend and business partner, James Crawford. Worse, she had been feeding James inside information about Sinclair Industries, helping him steal clients and undermine Mr. Sinclair's deals. Isabella felt a pang of sympathy she hadn't expected. "That's terrible." "It destroyed him," Grace continued. "He not only lost the woman he loved but also his best friend and nearly lost his company. He managed to recover the business, but emotionally, he never did. After that, he swore he would never let anyone close again. He became cold, focused only on work and success. His mother Victoria made things worse, constantly reminding him that emotions are weaknesses and that marriage should be strategic, not romantic." Suddenly, Gabriel's behavior made more sense. He wasn't just naturally cold, he was protecting himself from being hurt again. Isabella had become collateral damage in his determination to never be vulnerable. That Thursday, Isabella attended her first public event as Mrs. Sinclair. The charity luncheon was held at a country club, filled with wealthy socialites and business leaders. Gabriel picked her up in his sleek black car, looking impeccable in a tailored suit. He barely glanced at her as she got in, though she had spent hours getting ready, wearing an elegant pale blue dress that the stylist had insisted was perfect for the occasion. "Remember, we're happily married," Gabriel said as they pulled up to the entrance. "Smile, laugh at my jokes if I make any, and for God's sake, don't mention that we barely know each other." "I understand my role," Isabella replied coolly. "I've been practicing." His jaw tightened, but he said nothing more. As they entered the venue, his demeanor changed completely. He placed his hand on the small of her back, smiled warmly, and introduced her to everyone with what appeared to be genuine pride. To the outside world, they were the perfect couple, newlyweds still in the honeymoon phase. Isabella played her part flawlessly, laughing at the right moments, making polite conversation, and staying close to Gabriel's side. But inside, she felt like a fraud, an actress in a play where everyone else believed the fiction was real. During lunch, Victoria Sinclair approached their table with another elegantly dressed woman. "Gabriel, Isabella, I'd like you to meet Patricia Montgomery. She's organizing the annual winter gala and wanted to discuss having you both as guests of honor." Before Gabriel could respond, Patricia smiled warmly at Isabella. "Mrs. Sinclair, I've heard so much about you. Tell me, how are you adjusting to married life? It must be quite a change from your previous circumstances." The comment was barbed, a subtle reminder that Isabella didn't belong in this world. She saw Victoria's satisfied smirk and felt anger rising in her chest. Instead of shrinking back, Isabella straightened her spine and smiled graciously. "It's been wonderful, actually. Gabriel has been incredibly supportive, and I'm learning so much about the charitable work the Sinclair family does. In fact, I'd love to get more involved. Before I married Gabriel, I volunteered at a children's hospital where my sister received treatment. Perhaps we could discuss ways to support pediatric cancer research at the gala." Patricia's eyes lit up. "What a wonderful idea. That would be perfect." Victoria's smile had frozen on her face, clearly not expecting Isabella to take initiative. Gabriel glanced at her with what might have been surprise, though his expression remained carefully neutral. After the luncheon, as they drove home, Gabriel finally spoke. "That was unexpected. The Pediatric Cancer Initiative. My sister has leukemia," Isabella said quietly. "I know what families go through when they can't afford treatment. If I have to be Mrs. Sinclair, I might as well use the position to actually help people." Gabriel was silent for a long moment. "That's admirable. I'll have my assistant contact the hospital and set up a meeting." It was the first real conversation they had had since the wedding, and Isabella felt a tiny crack in the wall between them. Over the following weeks, Isabella threw herself into planning the charity initiative. She met with doctors, reviewed proposals, and worked with Gabriel's team to create a foundation that would provide funding for families who couldn't afford cancer treatment for their children. To her surprise, Gabriel attended several of the meetings, offering input and connections that proved invaluable. One evening, as they reviewed documents in his home office, Gabriel looked up from his laptop. "Why are you doing this? You could spend your days shopping or lunching with the other society wives. Why work so hard on this foundation?" Isabella met his gaze directly. "Because I know what it's like to feel helpless when someone you love is sick. I know what it's like to count every penny and still come up short. If I can prevent other families from going through that, then maybe this arrangement isn't completely meaningless." Something shifted in Gabriel's expression, a softening around his eyes. "Your sister, how is she doing?" "She's responding well to the treatment," Isabella said, surprised he was asking. "The doctors are cautiously optimistic." "Thank you for making that possible." Gabriel nodded, returning his attention to his computer, but the tension in the room had changed somehow, become less hostile and more companionable. The following month, Victoria Sinclair hosted a dinner party at her estate, and attendance was mandatory. Isabella dressed carefully in an emerald green gown, knowing she would be scrutinized by Victoria and her circle of friends. Gabriel picked her up from the master suite, and when she opened the door, she saw him do a double take. "You look beautiful," he said, and for the first time, it sounded genuine rather than perfunctory. "Thank you," Isabella replied, feeling her cheeks warm. The dinner party was as intimidating as she had feared. Victoria's friends were all from old money families, and they made subtle digs about Isabella's background throughout the evening. She endured it with grace until one woman, Evelyn Hartford, made a comment that crossed the line. I suppose Gabriel married you for your novelty value. After all, the Sinclair men have always had unique tastes. His grandfather married a showgirl, you know. The table fell silent. Isabella saw Victoria's satisfied expression and Gabriel's darkening face. But instead of being embarrassed, Isabella felt her anger crystallize into something sharp and clear. Actually, Evelyn, Gabriel married me because he saw something in me beyond my bank account or my family name. Unlike some people, he values authenticity over pretension. And yes, his grandfather married a showgirl, and by all accounts, they had a long and happy marriage built on genuine love and respect. Perhaps that's something we should all aspire to rather than mock. Evelyn's face flushed red. Victoria looked furious. But Amelia, who was seated across the table, burst out laughing and raised her glass. Well said, Isabella. Welcome to the family indeed. Gabriel reached under the table and squeezed Isabella's hand briefly, a gesture of support that surprised her. When she glanced at him, she saw something new in his eyes, respect. After dinner, as they prepared to leave, Gabriel pulled her aside on Victoria's terrace. That was brave, standing up to them like that. I'm tired of being treated like I don't belong, Isabella said. I may not have been born into this world, but I'm here now, and I'm not going to apologize for it. Good, Gabriel said, and there was an intensity in his gaze that made her heart skip. Don't ever apologize for who you are, Isabella. They should be the ones apologizing. It was the kindest thing he had ever said to her, and Isabella felt something shift between them, something fragile but real. Maybe, just maybe, this cold arranged marriage could become something more. Maybe the ice surrounding Gabriel's heart was beginning to thaw. As they drove home through the dark streets, Isabella glanced at her husband's profile and allowed herself to hope. The weeks following the dinner party at Victoria's estate marked a subtle but undeniable shift in the Sinclair household. Gabriel began joining Isabella for breakfast in the mornings, initially just sitting across from her with his tablet and coffee, reading through emails while she ate in silence. But gradually, conversation began to flow. He would ask about her foundation work, and she would inquire about his business deals. The exchanges were brief and careful, two people learning to navigate a relationship neither had chosen but both were stuck in. Isabella threw herself into the Pediatric Cancer Foundation with renewed energy. She visited the Children's Hospital weekly, spending time with young patients and their exhausted parents. She understood their fear and desperation in a way that the other society women never could, and it made her work feel purposeful. Charlotte's treatment was progressing well, and seeing her sister's improvement fueled Isabella's determination to help other families facing the same battle. One afternoon, as Isabella was reviewing grant applications in the library, Gabriel appeared in the doorway. He had arrived home earlier than usual, his tie loosened and his hair slightly disheveled in a way that made him look younger and less intimidating. "May I come in?" he asked, and Isabella noticed he was actually asking permission rather than simply entering. "Of course, it's your house," she replied, gesturing to the chair across from her. Gabriel sat down, and she noticed he looked uncomfortable, as if he wanted to say something but didn't know how to begin. Finally, he spoke. "I wanted to thank you for what you did at my mother's dinner party." Standing up to those women took courage. They can be vicious. They're bullies, Isabella said simply. And I learned a long time ago that bullies only have power if you let them intimidate you. Gabriel studied her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "You're not what I expected, Isabella Morgan." "It's Isabella Sinclair now," she reminded him with a slight smile. "And what did you expect?" He leaned back in his chair, considering his words. "Someone who would be content to spend my money and enjoy the lifestyle without actually caring about anything real. Most women would have jumped at the chance to have unlimited shopping budgets and social status. But you actually work at the foundation. You visit sick children. You stand up to my mother. It's unexpected. I told you from the beginning that I was doing this for my family, not for money or status," Isabella said quietly. "I keep my promises," Gabriel. Even when they cost me everything. Something flickered in his eyes, an emotion she had never seen there before. Regret, perhaps, or understanding. I know this arrangement hasn't been easy for you. I haven't made it easy. I've kept you at a distance because that's what I thought was necessary to protect myself. Protect yourself from what? Isabella asked gently. Gabriel stood and walked to the window, his back to her. Grace told you about Sophia, didn't she? Yes, Isabella admitted. I'm sorry that happened to you. He turned to face her, and for the first time since she had met him, his guard was completely down. She destroyed me, Isabella. Not just the betrayal, though that was devastating enough. But the fact that I had been so blind, so trusting, so stupidly in love that I never saw it coming. I swore I would never let anyone have that kind of power over me again. So you built walls, Isabella said, understanding flooding through her. And I became collateral damage. You were supposed to be, Gabriel admitted. This marriage was supposed to be purely transactional. I needed a wife to secure my grandfather's inheritance, you needed money for your family. Clean, simple, emotionless. But you've made it complicated by being genuinely good. Before Isabella could respond, Gabriel's phone rang. He glanced at the screen and his expression darkened. I need to take this. It's my attorney. Excuse me. He left the room, and Isabella sat there processing what had just happened. Gabriel had actually opened up to her, shown her a glimpse of the man beneath the cold exterior. It was progress, fragile and tentative, but real. That evening, Gabriel didn't come home for dinner. Isabella ate alone, trying not to worry about the tension she had seen in his face when he took that call. It was nearly midnight when she heard the front door open and the sound of voices in the foyer. Concerned, she put on her robe and went downstairs to find Gabriel in his study with his lawyer and Amelia, all of them looking grim. What's happened? Isabella asked from the doorway. Gabriel looked up, and she saw genuine fear in his eyes. James Crawford has filed a lawsuit against Sinclair Industries. He's claiming I stole proprietary information from him and used it to build my company. It's completely false, but he has fabricated documents and testimony. If he wins, it could destroy everything my grandfather built. Amelia noticed Isabella and gave her a tight smile. James is my brother's former best friend and business partner. The one who had the affair with Sophia. Apparently, revenge is a dish best served with a side of corporate espionage charges. How can he do this? Isabella asked, moving into the room. Surely the truth will come out. The lawyer, an older man named Robert Fletcher, shook his head. In cases like this, perception matters as much as truth. James has positioned himself as the wronged party, and he has significant resources. The media will have a field day with this, and it could tank our stock prices before we ever get to trial. Gabriel ran his hands through his hair, a gesture of frustration Isabella had never seen from him before. He's doing this because he knows it will hurt me. The business was the one thing I had left after Sophia, and now he wants to take that too. Isabella's mind was racing. What does he want? There must be something he's really after beyond just revenge. He wants a settlement, Fletcher said. A substantial one. $50 million and a public apology admitting wrongdoing. Absolutely not, Gabriel said firmly. I won't let him extort me and I won't lie about something I didn't do. Then we prepare for a long legal battle, Fletcher said. I'll need access to all company records, correspondence, everything we can use to build our defense. After Fletcher left, Amelia hugged her brother. We'll get through this, Gabriel. You didn't do anything wrong, and the truth will come out. After Amelia departed, Gabriel slumped in his chair, looking more defeated than Isabella had ever seen him. I can't believe this is happening. After everything I've done to rebuild after what they did to me, he's still finding ways to destroy my life. Isabella sat down across from him. You're not going to let him win, are you? You're going to fight this. Gabriel looked at her with exhausted eyes. Fighting could take years and cost millions. It could drag the Sinclair name through the mud and damage everything my grandfather spent his life building. Maybe it would be easier to just pay him and make it go away. That's not the Gabriel Sinclair I've been living with for the past 2 months, Isabella said firmly. The man I know doesn't back down from challenges. He faces them head-on. You did nothing wrong, Gabriel. Don't let James Crawford make you into a victim again. Something in her words seemed to reach him. He straightened in his chair, and she saw determination replace the defeat in his eyes. You're right. I won't let him win. Not this time. Over the next few weeks, the lawsuit dominated their lives. The media coverage was brutal, with headlines speculating about Gabriel's business practices and digging up the old scandal with Sophia. Photographers camped outside the mansion gates, trying to get shots of the embattled billionaire and his mysterious wife. Through it all, Isabella stood by Gabriel's side. She attended court hearings, smiled for cameras, and gave a carefully prepared statement to the press about her complete faith in her husband's integrity. She learned the details of the case inside and out, helping Gabriel and Fletcher organize documents and prepare arguments. Working together brought them closer in ways Isabella had never expected. They spent late nights in his study, reviewing files and discussing strategy. Gabriel began to rely on her opinion, valuing her perspective. The walls between them were crumbling, replaced by genuine partnership and something that felt dangerously like friendship. One particularly difficult night, after a brutal day in court where James's lawyers had been especially aggressive, Gabriel and Isabella sat in his study sharing a bottle of wine. She had never seen him drink much before, but tonight he poured himself a generous glass and downed half of it in one swallow. He looked at me in that courtroom, Gabriel said quietly. James. After everything we went through together, all the years of friendship, he looked at me with such hatred. Like I was the one who betrayed him instead of the other way around. Some people can't accept responsibility for their own actions, Isabella said gently. They have to make someone else the villain to justify their choices. Gabriel turned to her, and in his eyes she saw raw vulnerability. Why are you doing this, Isabella? Helping me, standing by me. This wasn't part of our arrangement. You could have stayed out of it, kept yourself away from the scandal. Because it's the right thing to do, she replied simply. And because despite everything, despite how this marriage started, I've come to care about what happens to you. The words hung in the air between them, loaded with meaning neither of them was quite ready to acknowledge. Gabriel reached out and took her hand, his thumb brushing over her knuckles in a gesture that was tender and intimate in a way nothing between them had been before. I don't deserve your loyalty, he said softly. I've treated you terribly, kept you at a distance, made you feel unwanted in your own home. But you've been kinder to me than I had any right to expect. People aren't what they deserve, Gabriel, Isabella said. They're what they choose to be. You chose to save my family when you could have walked away. Maybe you did it for practical reasons, but you still did it. That means something. They sat there in the quiet study, hands linked, something shifting between them that felt monumental. The arranged marriage was becoming something real, something neither of them had planned but both were starting to want. The breakthrough in the case came from an unexpected source. Grace, the housekeeper, mentioned to Isabella that she had a friend who used to work for James Crawford. When Isabella mentioned this to Gabriel, he immediately contacted Fletcher, and they arranged to interview the woman. Martha Williams had been James's executive assistant for 5 years before he fired her 6 months ago. She was bitter about her dismissal and more than willing to talk. She brought with her copies of emails she had saved, emails that proved James had been planning to file false charges against Gabriel for months, coordinating with Sophia to gather information and fabricate evidence. This is exactly what we need, Fletcher said excitedly. This proves malicious intent and conspiracy. We can not only defend against the lawsuit but countersue for defamation and fraud. The next court date was dramatic. Fletcher presented the new evidence, and James's lawyers were caught completely off guard. The judge reviewed the emails and correspondence, her expression growing increasingly stern. By the end of the day, she had dismissed James's lawsuit with prejudice and ordered him to pay Gabriel's legal fees. Outside the courthouse, Gabriel pulled Isabella into an embrace that surprised them both. "We won," he whispered against her hair. "Thank you for standing by me through this." That night, they celebrated with Amelia and Grace at the mansion. For the first time since Isabella had arrived, the house felt warm and alive, filled with laughter and genuine happiness. As the evening wore on and the others departed, Gabriel and Isabella found themselves alone on the terrace, looking out over the lights of the city. "Isabella," Gabriel said quietly, turning to face her. "These past weeks, working with you, seeing your strength and your kindness, it's made me realize something. This marriage may have started as an arrangement, but it's become the most real thing in my life." Isabella's heart was pounding. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that I don't want this to be fake anymore," he replied, reaching up to cup her face gently. "I don't want separate bedrooms and separate lives. I want a real marriage with you, if you'll have me. I know I don't deserve a second chance after how I treated you, but I'm asking for one anyway." Tears filled Isabella's eyes. "I've been falling for you, Gabriel. Even when I didn't want to, even when it seemed hopeless. Somewhere along the way, you stopped being the cold stranger I married and became the man I want to spend my life with." Gabriel leaned in and kissed her, and this time it was nothing like their wedding kiss. This was passionate and tender, full of promise and hope. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathless. 2 weeks later, Charlotte's doctors declared her in complete remission. Isabella cried happy tears as she hugged her sister, and Gabriel stood beside her, his arm around her waist, no longer the distant billionaire but her partner and husband in every sense of the word. Victoria Sinclair eventually came around, grudgingly admitting that Isabella had proven herself worthy of the Sinclair name. Amelia was thrilled to see her brother happy again, truly happy in a way he hadn't been in years. The Pediatric Cancer Foundation flourished, helping dozens of families afford treatment for their children. Isabella poured her heart into the work, and Gabriel supported her fully, attending fundraisers and using his business connections to expand the foundation's reach. 6 months after the lawsuit was resolved, Gabriel surprised Isabella with a trip to a private island. On their last evening there, as they walked along the beach at sunset, he stopped and took her hands. "When we got married, I made vows I didn't mean," he said. "I said words about love and cherishing you that were lies meant for the audience. I want to say them again now, and mean every word." Tears streamed down Isabella's face as Gabriel spoke vows he had written himself, promises of love and partnership, of standing together through whatever challenges life brought. When he finished, Isabella spoke her own vows, telling him how he had become her home, her heart, her everything. They renewed their vows right there on the beach, with only the waves as witnesses, and this time when Gabriel kissed his bride, it was with all the love and passion he had been holding back for so long. Their story had begun with a cold transaction, a marriage of convenience that neither wanted. But through trials and tribulations, through standing together against those who would tear them apart, they had found something neither expected: true love. The ice had melted, revealing the warmth that had been hidden beneath all along. Isabella Morgan had walked into Gabriel Sinclair's life as a stranger, a woman selling herself to save her family. But she had become so much more: his partner, his confidant, his greatest supporter, and finally, the love of his life. And Gabriel, the man who swore he would never love again, had found that love doesn't ask permission. It arrives when you least expect it, with the person you least planned for, and transforms everything you thought you knew about yourself. In the end, their arranged marriage became the greatest love story neither of them saw coming, proof that sometimes the best things in life are the ones we never knew we needed until they're standing right in front of us, waiting for us to be brave enough to reach out and hold on.